Pete Buttigieg, my favorite subject, air travel. So as counterpoints did a phenomenal job doing yesterday, we had a complete shutdown of air travel in the United States for several hours up until 9 a.m. Eastern time. I don't have to tell you that causes massive cascading delays, both international and within the country. There were even some stories of planes that were literally halfway through in the air and had to turn around and go back.
Oh,
so
I missed that.
What a nightmare for people
so
who had to participate. I believe it was Marquise Brownlee who talked about that, the tech YouTuber. Anyway, so all eyes on our Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. This is now the third massive meltdown of U.S. air travel that has happened under him, the second in just a matter of weeks. What's going on? So we turn to our great secretary in the middle of this crisis, and he says, I have no idea what's going on. Here's what he said after air travel was actually resumed. Let's take a listen.
Well, now that the system is up and running, our primary focus is to determine that root cause. And I've directed FAA to figure out exactly how this happened, the timeline piece by piece about what was known overnight going into last night and then coming out of it. And most importantly, as you might imagine, a critical system like this has a lot of redundancy built into it with backups. So we need to understand why, with all of that redundancy, it still rose to the level that there had to be a ground stop lasting about an hour and a half and the kind of delays that we saw. This is an incredibly complex system. So glitches or complications happen all the time.
Glitches or complications happen all the time. I have no idea what happened. What do we pay you for? You know, look, let's go and put the next one up there on the screen. There were 10,000 flights that were delayed or canceled just yesterday. And passengers, of course, just having a complete nightmare. Also, anybody who flies a lot knows this, which is that if the morning flight gets delayed, those flights fly 5 legs after that. If the 6 a.m. gets delayed, that means the 9 a.m. is delayed, which means the noon, the 4 p.m., and the 6 p.m., and the 7 p.m. So you can go all the way down the line. It was a nightmare traveling yesterday. And it's just one of the, look, we have one of the nation's most robust air, we have so much air travel that occurs in this country due to our geography. It used to be, we were kind of the shining light of aviation across the world. We've had complete meltdowns in our system all under this man. People are like, what is he supposed to do? Oversee the computer programmers? I'm like, yeah, actually, because the Inflation Reduction Act, infrastructure bill, and others actually gave $1 billion to the U.S. Department of Transportation specifically to update FAA computer systems. Now, in terms of what actually went wrong, news came out this morning. It says that a computer programmer effectively uploaded like a damaged file, and that's what corrupted data, and that's what brought down the whole system for several hours. Okay, but my question is, like, why is it even possible to be that vulnerable for one of the most critical systems in the entire United States, where you ground every flight? That stuff hasn't happened since like 9/11 in terms of no flights that are allowed up in the sky. This is a total breakdown in the FAA system. Also, we should remember, Buttigieg was bragging about the FAA and its ability to handle some of the critical infrastructure in this moment when the airlines were actually blaming the FAA for many of the delays several months ago. And he specifically pointed to things that he was doing within the FAA to make it operate better. I mean, I just think this highlights like a basic lack of competence because, fool me once, one problem, okay, we can talk a little bit, although the one problem actually lasted several months. This is the third major meltdown. This is the worst year in like a 12-month or so period in modern history of air travel since 9/11. That is now all happening under Pete Buttigieg.
Yes.
And billions of dollars in commerce are being lost, but put that aside. Think about the people who this stuff affects. It's not a joke. Yeah. People are flying to funerals sometimes, to weddings, it ruins people's lives whenever you have stuff like this happen. And the stress and the extra money that some people have to undergo, it's just outrageous. It's not just for the rich. There's a lot of working and middle class people are very affected by this.
Yeah, and Pete is supposed to be Mr. McKinsey. So he's supposed to be, expert at making these systems run super efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. And I agree with you. If it was just this one incident, you could say, you know what, not really his fault, like it's an old system, who could know, et cetera. When you look at the pattern of one crisis after another crisis after another crisis, it becomes very clear. This man is wildly unqualified for, and by the way, uninterested in actually doing this job. Pete Buttigieg is basically good at two things, and they're related things. One of those things is getting rich people to donate money to his campaign. That's number one. Wine cave, remember all that. Number 2 is saying a lot of words that basically mean nothing. Those are the 2 things he's good at. And last time there was a big airline crisis with Southwest and whatever, I saw Claire McCaskill on Twitter. She reposted one of his cable news appearances, and she's like, oh my God, he's just so good. And it's like, Jesus Christ, you all are the hollowest people on earth. The man is failing at his job in every way you could possibly measure. He's got to be the worst cabinet secretary in the entire administration.
By far.
And yet he goes on cable news and he's able to like bullshit and spin for a few minutes. And now you're like, oh my God, he's so amazing. It is so shallow and so ridiculous. We all know the reason he's in this job. It's because he did what Joe Biden wanted him to do in the primary when he was told to do it. He didn't want to be OMB secretary because he wanted the glamour of being a cabinet secretary and being a part of the infrastructure package and traveling around to his ribbon cuttings. This has been a disaster for him politically. It's been a bigger disaster for the country at a time when, you know, I don't know that the transportation secretary has ever been more important.
No, this is probably since 1975, the deregulation of airlines, and arguably during 9/11, it's never been more important.
You had the supply chain crises, you've had these airline crises, and again,
railroads.
To make it really clear on this man has a lot of power to hold these airlines to account. There are all sorts of issues here where basically they book out a flight schedule they know they can't possibly achieve, but they're able to goose their revenue and their earnings by booking people on flights that everything has to go absolutely perfect in order for it to happen. And they took all this money from us, they got bailed out, and then they pushed their staff out. So they're wildly understaffed, again, at their own, like this was their own failure. Multiple politicians, Ro Khanna, Bernie Sanders, others, David Dayen and the American Prospect, they've been pointing out ways that he could use his power in order to make sure these airlines are held to account and actually have real measurable fees and that passengers are being made whole when this happens to him. Hasn't done it. He'll go on and he'll bluster on TV, and they have not charged a single major airline. And then you're right. He was also part of perhaps the biggest Biden administration betrayal of working people, which was crushing the rail workers and sending them back to work and siding with the bosses there. So it has been one catastrophe after another catastrophe after another catastrophe. And I don't know if this is related or not. You know, Debbie Stabenow, who's the senator from Michigan, she's announced she's retiring. So that opens up an open seat there. Obviously, it's going to be highly competitive, both in the general election, also in the primary. Pete had just moved to Michigan, which is, I guess, where Chasten is from.
Yes, that's right.
And so I don't know if this is why, but he's already announced he's not going to go for that seat. I mean, my biggest hope out of all of this is that this has actually really damaged his political career and that people actually care about the substance of the fact that this man was totally unable and unequipped to do what was a really important job at a really important time.
Tremendously important job. And look, we're not just talking. Put the data up there, please. I went ahead and pulled this from earlier this year. Take a look at 22 versus 2019. In January of 2022, for U.S. airline cancellations, 2.8% 2019, more than double, 5.6% in 2022. And it remained elevated from January to September, with only 3 months in 2019 through September where things resumed. But the delay number was also a catastrophe. It remained above 20% all the way from January to August. That's almost 1/5 of all flights in the United States that were delayed under Pete Buttigieg, with a normal delay rate of somewhere between 14 and 15% on average before times. Again, he has actual unilateral authority to levy fines. Furthermore, in terms of the actual behavior of the airlines itself, look, the airlines are greedy and they have been doing everything they possibly can to juice their stock price. And in fact, one of the problems is all of the airlines are required to try and contribute to an FAA infrastructure upgrade, given the fact that they benefit from it. And as our friend Matt Stoller pointed out, put this up there on the screen, they have been trying to avoid contributing to FAA infrastructure upgrades specifically so that they can do stock buybacks. This was a key part of the Southwest Airlines story. Southwest Airlines' meltdown happened just 3 weeks after they issued or announced a new dividend to stockholders because they said that profits were good and that they're well prepared for holiday travel. Those profits easily and should have been reinvested in their staffing system, which would not have required them at one point to cancel 50% of all flights worldwide in the middle of one of the busiest holiday travel seasons. He has authority to look at all of this, and I am watching this. insane, as you said. We have never needed a good transportation secretary more. Is he individually responsible for each one of these things? No, but he has oversight authority and needs to tackle this with the crisis. Every single one of us knows that he cares more about going on CNN to talk about the gay marriage bill. That's all he's actually good for. Going on Fox and be like, no, Brett Baer, let me tell you why I'm actually doing it. By the Biden administration is the best thing. Look, man, all of us want to do is catch a flight and have a reasonable expectation that it's going to be on time, and that if it does get canceled, that you won't get bilked, for the money that you already spent on a very inflated ticket.
Definition of an empty suit. And bigger picture, think of what it says about the Democratic Party, that they're like, big up and comers, the bench that they are so excited to build the bridge to the future with is Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg. I mean, two of the least equipped, least talent in terms of actually doing the job. Now, Kamala is also even terrible on TV. Pete is just a complete empty suit. He is a BS artist. He's good at that. He's good at his little cable news appearances. He is very good at that. Does that help you get your flights? Does that help the rail workers who needed an administration to have their back? Did that help our supply chain issues to get solved? No, not whatsoever. When it actually mattered, when you actually needed content and someone who was capable and someone who was willing to stand up to the airlines who are powerful moneyed interests, nowhere to be found. And the last thing I'll note here is even the mainstream press has taken note.
Yeah,
I saw a piece this morning at Axios. Now they frame it as some of this is unfair, et cetera, et cetera. But it is starting to be noted in the outlets that Pete cares about very much that this has gone extremely poorly for him.
Good. Maybe it'll encourage him to do his job better, but I'm not going to hold my breath next time.
I don't know that he can. I don't know he's capable of it. Even if he wanted to, I don't know that he's capable.
I saw somebody say, Krystal Saagar, you guys should just drive to Austin. It's probably easier at that point.
That's what Kyle would like to do. He hates flying.
That's a whole other discussion.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.